Good morning. I'm looking at Habakkuk again, Habakkuk chapter 2. I'm going to read from verse 6 through to verse 11. These are the first two woes pronounced on Babylon in response to Habakkuk's second complaint to the Lord of how he can use Babylon in judging Judah. But he speaks of all of those who Babylon have attacked. And he says, "Will not all of them taunt him, Babylon, with ridicule and scorn, saying, 'Woe to him who piles up stolen goods and makes himself wealthy by extortion. How long must this go on? Will not your debtors suddenly arise? Will they not wake up and make you tremble? Then you will become their victim. Because you have plundered many nations, the peoples who are left will plunder you. For you have shed man's blood. You have destroyed lands and cities and everyone in them. Woe to him who builds his realm by unjust gain, to set his nest on high, to escape the clutches of ruin. You have plotted the ruin of many peoples, shaming your own house and forfeiting your life. The stones of the wall will cry out, and the beams of the woodwork will echo it." Read the third word as well. "Woe to him who builds a city with bloodshed, and establishes a town by crime. Has not the Lord Almighty determined that the people's labor is only fuel for the fire? That the nations exhaust themselves for nothing? For the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord, as the waters cover the sea." Verses 9 to 11 are the second woe in this list of woes coming on the Babylonians. And here it seems to be the king and the ruling class that are talked to. Their priority isn't the good of their people. Certainly not the good of the non-Babylonians. They amass gain. And amassing wealth isn't necessarily evil. Wealth can be made in legitimate ways. But what we do with it, if we have it, shows our heart attitudes. But the Babylonians amassed wealth in unjust ways and for selfish purposes. They amass unjust gain to build their realm, literally their house. They're using their wealth to build homes on high to protect themselves from ruin. Picture a drug lord using his money to build a palace in the mountains and surrounding himself with guards and cameras, protecting himself from enemies. The Babylonians had cut off many peoples, and this brings shame on them. Forfeiting their lives here can be translated as sinning against themselves. They ignore the voice inside them telling them that what they're doing is wrong, that it's evil, and they can't escape that. Habakkuk pictures their very houses crying out and echoing the sins of the Babylonians. Well, what is their sin here? Well, they amass unjust gain, and they do so to protect themselves and their name and their children, who will follow them as leaders. And we see this in Nebuchadnezzar, who pursued power and wealth and security, even while committing spiritual suicide, as one writer puts it. And so the warning to us, well, David Pryor in his book on Habakkuk writes, King Nebuchadnezzar is probably one of the most successful, prosperous, and influential people in the history of the human race. If he, in God's perspective, forfeited his life, why don't we blindly pursue similar, if comparatively paltry, goals? These verses get us to ask ourselves, what are we seeking to build with our lives? And then woe 3 comes in verses 12 to 14. If you were a visitor to Babylon, or other Babylonian cities, you would be amazed at the buildings and the gardens, the grandeur, the opulence of it all. But when God looked at them, he saw the slave labor used to build them, the peoples cut off, the injustice, the concentration of wealth and power, the desire for glory and honor for self rather than for God. The blood of the dead will cry out to God for justice against the Babylonians. And that's true today for those who persecute others. I can't help thinking about the football stadiums being built in Qatar using foreign labour. with some dying because of the terrible conditions there. And the Lord says, woe to him who does that. In the context of eternity, Habakkuk says two things. People will work, but unless it is for God, it will all go up in flames. The nations strive, but if it isn't for God, it's in vain, for nothing. It's empty. Because in the end, it won't be people's glory that will fill the earth, however powerful and large an empire they may have. It will be the knowledge of the glory of the Lord that will fill the earth as the waters cover the sea. This knowledge isn't just head knowledge. It's intimate knowledge. It speaks of relationship. And so it speaks of those who will see this happening, God's people. Isaiah uses similar words to describe what God will do in the face of the Assyrian violence as they destroyed the northern kingdom Israel. And here Habakkuk says God will do this in the face of Babylonian violence to the southern kingdom of Judah. God will build a kingdom of peace and righteousness, not blood and injustice. If woe too asks us, what are we building with our lives? This woe asks us, are we building for our glory? Or are we building for God's glory? Are we looking for the day when the earth will be filled with the knowledge of the glory of the Lord as the waters cover the sea? Is that our hope? Because that's why Jesus came.